bunked school to frolic with my friends, and we went and watched this Tamil movie, and there was this really buxom heroine, the female protagonist, who kept saying "Vanakkam, Vanakkam." So I was like, I have to say "Vanakkam" at least once to somebody in my life. Anyway, so welcome to this week's podcast, and I'm going to start off with a little poem, a nursery rhyme that a lot of you might be familiar with. Some of you might never have heard it either. And here's how it goes. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to fetch her poor doggy a bone. But when she went there, the cupboard was bare, and so the poor dog got none. Four things struck me about this poem. One was, why was that bone in the cupboard? This is when I was 3-4 years old when I first learned it. Secondly, bone does not rhyme with none. So either I say bun and none, or I say bone and known. The third thing was, poor little doggy, how disappointed he must have been. And the fourth most important thing was, I'm going to make sure that my cupboard is never bare. Yep, you've guessed it. Today we are talking about groceries, shopping for groceries, storing your cupboards, and also, fresh produce and things like that. Though I personally really admire and love bare cupboards. I mean, they look so beautiful, pristine and clean, and just waiting apprehensively, and not apprehensively, but more in anticipation of all the things that are going to get stacked and lined in there, all the goodies that are going to go in there. And once it's full, so you lose that. But it's good to see empty cupboards from time to time. And I really admire people who go through life with empty cupboards, because they just don't have the time maybe, or don't have the inclination, whatever the case may be. Like there's this book, a series of books actually, where the main protagonist, it's a murder mystery series written by Sue Grafton, and her female protagonist, she never ever has any stores in her cupboard. She's always eating out, and when she has to eat at home, she's just having peanut butter and pickle sandwiches. And even though she's otherwise a foodie. So I guess there are people like that as well. But according to me, if you love cooking and if you love eating, then you also love grocery shopping. I know I do. And luckily for me, so does Amit. Now, my affair with the kitchen started in earnest, this was 80s to mid 90s. At that time, grocery shopping meant going to the local grocery store, the kirana, or what in Bengali we call mudi dokan, or to the banya shop, as in Delhi it was more popularly referred to. And you made friends with the storekeeper, and he sort of, opened up his secret caves full of all these wonderful things, and he would tell you, ye chawal, buy this rice, this is the best for this week, it's just come in from Jammu, or it's just come in from Dehradun, and this is the rajma I've got, and this is, this dhania is just, this coriander is just fresh, it's, still green, it's just come off the fields kind of thing. And it used to be such a joy buying from those guys, because they really knew their products, they knew where everything came from, they knew how it was used and what it was used for. They still do, and I very often do go to buy from these guys. In fact, down the street, there's this Gujarati Kirana store, and I was shopping over there one day, and this other gentleman sort of walked in, and he was like, masala dena. So he was speaking in Gujarati and asked for some masala. So I saw the storekeeper sort of, in a newspaper, he sort of took a spoon of this and a spoon of that and a spoon of something else, and he put together this mix of spices. So I was watching all this, and I said, what is this, what have you made? So he said, oh, this is a standard masala that is used for all vegetables, dal, whatever you're cooking, you just add a spoonful of this and you have the most delicious dish ready. So I haven't tried it yet, but I am very tempted to. So I'm thinking maybe I should go down and buy his masala mix and figure out exactly, you know, what goes into it and how it ends up tasting, because I'm sure it's good because it's very popular. Then one of these grocery guys even taught me how to buy rice. So I had gone once, I was looking for some good basmati because we were going to be making some biryani. So I said, I want some really good basmati. So he said, Madam, there's nothing better than this. So I said, how do I know? So he said, take a little bit in your fist and sort of rub your hands together, warm it up, and then just hold it for 30 seconds or so, and then sniff at it. If you get the aroma, you know you're buying the best. And sure enough, I did get the aroma, and I ended up buying almost 10 kilos of that rice because he had sold it to me. In fact, even though their stores are crowded and chock-a-block full of all sorts of these glass jars and bins and packets and things like that, they know exactly where what is, and they know exactly what to serve you when you go in there. I really wish that some of these hypermarket owners would employ some of these grocery store guys to train their shop assistants, because I find those hypermarket shop assistants don't have a clue. They probably don't cook because their mama's still doing it. And they sort of, when you ask them, what is this masala used for, they sort of give you this blank look like, I don't know, kind of a thing. But yeah, so grocery store shopping is a great, great experience. But so was the hypermarket one. And the first time Amit and I, we were just new into our relationship. This was 1994. And we discovered this hypermarket called Nan's in South Extension, I think it was, in Delhi. And we were like, two kids in Disneyland or something of that sort. There were all these bright, colorful packets lined up beautifully on these clean shelves, and air-conditioned comfort. And, we were like pulling things off and, buying everything that we could, paying by credit card. For the first time in my life, I was buying onions and potatoes on a credit card. Something never heard of in India till then.
Ash and Chetty are here.
Hi Ash, hi Chetty, good to see you. And if you have questions, keep interrupting, no problems. So anyway, Amit and I went in, and we were like, going crazy with this hypermarket experience. We of course bought a lot of processed foods, cans of various kinds of meats, processed meats and cheeses and things that we would otherwise not really buy like that. And it ended up being a whole amount of impulse buying and excessive buying. And over the next few months, we realized that things were going a little haywire. Credit card bills were rising, and our small little apartment was getting too filled with all sorts of food products that we just did not have the time to eat. So we said, no, we have to put a halt on this. But then there were stores like in Delhi, there was Morning Stores in Greater Kailash, which had the most amazing selection of spices and dals from all across the country. And then there was Modern Bazaar in Vasant Vihar, which had the all these foreign goods and things like that. So we really enjoyed shopping in those hypermarkets. But Amit and I sort of, figured that this is something that cannot go on, and we need to sort of, pull in the reins and discipline ourselves a little bit more. So it was a hard talk that both of us had with, a lot of finger pointing. You bought this and you bought that, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so finally I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a list. So
Get up and switch on the fan. I think it's getting too hot.
no, it's okay. So in order to make that list, what I did was I sat down in the morning with my cup of chai, And I stared out of the window, watching the sparrows playing musical rungs. And I thought, what did I think? I thought, what is the weather like? Right now it's raining, so I need to think of monsoon foods, and I need to also remember that, things are not going to keep that well, because monsoons means excessive humidity, means, less chances of things surviving. So cut down the quantities. What are the foods that we're going to be eating? Obviously, monsoon means a lot of pakoras and stuff like that. So make sure, that there's enough basin in the house. Then, are we going to be in town the whole time? Right now, yes, because of COVID. So all 30 days need to be planned for. Then, are we expecting any guests? Are there any special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries? Are we doing anything special that is going to require some ingredient or whatever? So, with all this in mind, I make my wish list. I'm calling this a wish list because once I go to the kitchen and I open all the cupboards and the drawers and everything and look at things that I have already, I realize that half the things in my list I already have quite a bit of. So out, 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 out. And then I realized that, the bottle of Worcestershire sauce in the fridge is actually empty. Amit just put it back over there without, telling me that, oh, this is empty, we need to buy more. So, or maybe I could have done it, but whoever, whatever. So then you add that to your list and things like that. So then your actual list happens once you go into the kitchen and you check everything. And while you're checking everything, also check the use by dates, the expiry dates on various things. There have been so many times when there was this time when we were going through this instant noodle phase, not just Maggi noodles, but all these other brands that you get, Coca and all sorts of things. So we were going through this phase of having a bowl of noodles every evening. Very unhealthy, I know, but it was a phase. And the phase lasted probably for 3 days or 4 days. But meanwhile, we had gone and bought a whole lot of these packets which sort of just lay in the drawer till 8 months later. I took them out and told Amit, I think we need to throw these out now. So it's very important to keep checking your drawers or your cupboards to see what you have and what you want to use. It also acts like an inspiration that when you open the cupboard and you find a packet of quinoa. I have a packet of quinoa in my cupboard because my sister made me buy it. So you look at that packet and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to make quinoa upma for breakfast tomorrow. So sometimes you find things that can inspire you to cook something new. But so you make your actual list. Now, the other thing that happens, which is a huge joke, is that you make a list and then you leave it somewhere and you land up at the store and you don't have your list with you. So I've become very clever about this. Now, the minute I make my list, I put it into my wallet, because that wallet is surely going with me. And even though, I land up at the store and I'm like checking my jeans pockets, like, oh dear, I think I forgot the list. And then, no, it's in my wallet. So that way you have your list with you. Now, the other problem that happens with a list is when you write something down in the list, you feel you have bought it. Because obviously if it's there in the list, then, you are going to buy it. But it might happen that you land up at the store and it's not there. And so if you've written like, half a kilo of, say, urad dal or something of that sort, and that particular day the store doesn't have that dal, you come back without it. But somewhere in your mind, you feel that, yes, I have bought it. And then when you go into the kitchen to make vadas or something of that sort and you realize, oh dear, I don't have any urad dal. What happened? I thought I bought it. No, I didn't buy it. Oops, I didn't buy it. So that's another problem that happens with lists. So once you've made your list and you've done your shopping, make sure that you've got everything on the list. Otherwise, if you haven't, make a smaller list. Okay. Now, once you've, okay, there's another problem with shopping for groceries. Not a problem, but like a gray area kind of thing. How often do you do it? Initially, Amit and I were like, we were very excited with this huge hypermarket that had come up in front of the house. So we were like, we'll treat it like an outing. and since we both love doing it, and we'll do our grocery shopping once a week. So we ended up going once a week to the grocery store and to the hypermarket. And apart from the things that we needed to buy to, restock whatever had finished in the previous week, we were doing again a lot of impulse buying, because the minute you're in a store, there is impulse buying involved, especially if you're using a credit card and you're not putting out cash. So once again, the house was getting filled with chocolates and all sorts of treats and things like that that we really didn't need. So both Amit and I were like, no, it's going to be once a month. We do grocery shopping once a month. And if it finishes, it finishes. We don't eat that particular thing till the next month comes around, barring, of course, rice and atta and sugar and tea and coffee and things like that. And then, of course, once you've got all these goodies home, storing them, how do you store them? And where do you store them? So, a few important rules that I discovered about storing groceries. One is your tea, don't store it with any other strong smelling stuff, because especially with detergents and stuff, because then your tea sort of imbibes those odors. In fact, even alcohol, do not store alcohol with anything else that is strong smelling, because that alcohol is going to absorb all the aroma, the smells of everything else. And I discovered that personally once I had gone to somebody's house for a drink in the evening, and the host very generously served me this Blue Label whiskey, and he asked me, how do you want it? So I was like, Blue Label, please do not dilute it, no water, no ice, nothing, I'll have it straight, because I love sipping that whiskey. So he poured me this measure of Blue Label whiskey, and I sipped it, and it was like, there's something wrong with this. And but I kept quiet. I couldn't sort of, make faces or say anything. Then after a few more sips, I was like, there's no way I can drink this. It was tasting of naphthalene balls. Hi, Anoop. Good to see you here. Anyway, so I sipped that whiskey 2-3 times, and then finally my other friend Claire, she was sitting next to me, so I just nudged her, even though she's a vodka drinker. I said, Claire, just sip this whiskey and tell me what's wrong with it. So she sipped it, by which time somebody else had also asked for whiskey. And they sort of turned around and said that, hey, there's something wrong with the whiskey. They were much more forthright than I was. And that's when I said, yeah, I think there's a problem with the whiskey. And we realized that where he had kept his whiskey bottles, his wife had very happily stored her whole stash of naphthalene bottles, bags in there. So everything, all that whiskey actually went to waste because it was all smelling of naphthalene. So detergents separately, teas separately, oils separately, because oil can actually also make other things smell oily, believe it or not. And of course your dry grains, the lentils, the dals and things like that in, airtight packets till you're actually opening it and putting it in a container. And for things like wheat and rice, which you buy in large quantities, 5-10 kilos depending on the size of your family, initially I had been told that if you put a few red chilies in there, it keeps the mites and weevils away. So I used to keep red chilies in my rice, and one day my daughter saw me, opening the bin and taking out the rice, and she saw the red chili, and she was like, oh mama, that's why everything tastes so hot. And there was no way I could explain to her that, one piece of dry red chili in that rice is not going to turn your whole meal hot. But anyway, I understand that bay leaves also work. I personally have never really had to do it, because 1 month is a good enough time for the quantity that I buy. And since it's just two of us, we have exact measures of, this quantity of rice and this quantity of atta and this quantity of various other things. But, and the dals, like I told you earlier, I find that, if you have small mouth containers, like water bottles, Then, in fact, if you go to our community page, I think Amit's posted a photograph of my army of dals over there. So I find if you have small mouth bottles, then the dals actually stay better. And of course, the sensitive things, keep them in the freezer. I mean, the freezer is a great place to store things like whole all-purpose flour and besan gram flour, and even things like cornmeal and various things like that. And so that's your dry groceries. Dry groceries also have seasons. So try and avoid buying things like new rice, because new rice doesn't cook uniformly. So if you're make sure when you go to, if you have a grocery store, if you're lucky enough to have a grocery store still around you, make sure you ask the store owner that is this new rice or is this old rice. Old rice is always better to buy. And a lot of these packaged rice that comes, that it tells you, you know, how many years old the rice is. So check the bags when you're buying your rice. Cornmeal is something in India, you get the best cornmeal in winter when it's, you know, the bhutta, the corn has all dried and been powdered. And of course, that's also the time when you can eat those makki ka roti and things like that. So I buy my cornmeal mostly in winter, and then I put it in the freezer so that it stays for a longer
No
time.
offense, Chappy, are saying all good with live streaming and its audio video is great.
Yeah, but as you can see, I still don't have a mic. Amit is still researching, and I think he's not paying enough attention to this research that he claims to be doing on the mic. So, um, cornmeal, yeah, okay. So, even grains have their seasonality. So, you know, if you can sort of educate yourself or, you know, read up on what is the best season to buy various things, you know, what is heating and what is cooling. So, you buy your grains according to that. Fresh produce is a different story altogether. One thing that COVID taught me was that there's actually a whole lot of vegetables that you can freeze. So initially, I used to think that it's only peas. So every time the pea season was getting over in India, which is around January, February, that's when, you know, you get the cheapest peas. I would buy like 5-10 kilos and sit and shell them and freeze them in bags in the freezer, so that in summer as well I would have access to peas. But the COVID years taught me that it's not just peas. You can freeze cauliflower, you can freeze carrots, you can freeze beans, you can even freeze okra. And the thing with freezing okra is wash it, dry it, chop it according to the dish that you might be wanting to cook. So like during the COVID times, we would buy like maybe 3-4 kilos of okra, and I would make, you know, small amounts of like 250 grams of, or half a kilo, in different cuts and different methods, and pop them into plastic bags and wrap them tightly and label them. Now, you don't need a fancy labeling machine to label your products. You can just get some masking tape and use a marker pen, you know, one of those thin ones, those CD writers, what they used to call, and just write your label with that as to
Say hi to Deep Sea Lioness.
Deep Sea Lioness. Wow, that's an interesting handle. Hi there, Deep Sea Lioness. How can you have a Deep Sea Lioness? Okay. All right. So, you know, you can create your own labels at home. And in the label, of course, I find it's important to write down exactly what it is, because once it's frozen, very often you don't really, you know, see what is in the packet. So I write down okra, kurkure fry cut, and the date on which I have frozen it, and into the freezer it goes. And when you're cooking that okra, take it out of the freezer and put it straight into the pan. Heat your oil.
Lioness says she loves the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Deepsy. Can I call you Deepsy or should I call you Linus? Okay, you decide on that. So when you're unfreezing, you don't thaw the okra out.
Lavanya is also here. Say hi to Lavanya.
Hi, Lavanya.
And Mr. Neumus.
Mr. Neumus. I'm sure you're not pronouncing that correctly.
That's his handle, Mr. Newmas.
How do you spell it?
New Mass. M-A-S.
Neomas.
Yeah. And
Neomas.
Lavanya says,
Okay.
wow, I'm loving the show. So many useful tips. Not even my mom knows about red chilies and rice.
Okay. So
You don't know what I told you. So you
yeah, yeah, red chilies and rice was a trick that I picked up somewhere along the way, and my mother didn't know about it either till I told her, and so that was me. Anyway, so when you're freezing okra and cooking it, just take it out of the freezer and put it straight away into the hot oil. Don't thaw it out, because the minute you thaw it, freezing is also a form of cooking, because the minute you're changing the temperature, you're changing the whatever. I'm sure Airplane Talk can sort of describe the physics and the chemistry of it all. But so don't thaw it, because the minute you thaw it, it'll turn mushy and slimy and stuff. Just put it straight into the oil, and your okra's as good as if you bought it fresh. And the other thing I learned about freezing food is that it doesn't really lose its vitamins or minerals if it hasn't been frozen for a long time. So if you've got, say, a good deal on cauliflowers and you've ended up buying 4 or 5 cauliflowers, then you want to cut some of them up, or you want to freeze one whole as it is because you want to roast it or something like that, or you want to make a nice cheese kind of bake with it. So you freeze it according to what you might be cooking with it. And so with frozen foods, you need to sort of pre-decide what you're going to do with it, because it's really best if you take it out of the freezer and put it straight into the pan. Tomatoes, of course, I love it when the January is the time to pick up really good tomatoes, and especially the organic tomatoes, because they are at their best, sweet, sour kind of thing. And don't puree it if you're going to freeze it for later use. Things like tomatoes and mangoes and soft things like that, I find when you puree it and freeze it, then what happens is that the main taste of it sort of goes down to the bottom, and on top what you have left is more ice and water. So the initial times when unless of course you're freezing them in small quantities and you're going to use the whole quantity in a dish, then it's a different matter. So it's better to just cut those tomatoes in quarters or whatever it is, and then put them in a bag and freeze it, so that you can use it, again, just straight into the pan the way you want to. Herbs are another thing which nowadays you get a lot of fresh herbs in the Indian markets, and they're actually better, more flavorful than the dried herbs that you get. At least I find that. And things like rosemary and thyme, which are hard, you can sun dry those if you have sunlight. In Bombay, you hardly have any sunlight. I mean, even in the height of summer, you've got so many buildings all around you that the sun barely gets to see your face for an hour or so. So it's better to freeze it. And when you're freezing herbs, what I do is I put them in an ice tray. You put the herb, pour a little olive oil on top, and you freeze it. So you have one ice tray with rosemary, one ice tray with thyme, one ice tray
Anita
with
Rani has joined us.
oregano. Hi, Anita Rani.
Rani.
Rani. Okay, Anita Rani. Hi. So, and you sort of, freeze each ice tray has a different herb. You can even do this with basil. With basil, you can also sort of, whir it in the blender and make like a pesto sauce and keep it and use it, keep it for later use as well. And even Thai basil, you can sort of, blend it and keep it and use a little bit in your Thai curry or whatever it is, because it's basically the flavor you want. Those are, of course, only for emergencies when you don't have access to fresh basil, or, somebody is in the mood for a Thai curry and you're like, oh my God, where do I get the basil from now? So, but my mantra is, for vegetables and for fruits, buy seasonal stuff and buy local, because that is where you get the best taste. Like for instance, summer is here and it's peach season, so But what you can do is you can create preserves, you can create pickles, and you can store them accordingly. And uh, you know, fruit preserves are great because when you have a fruit preserve in your fridge and you're making, you know, somebody drops in suddenly and you don't know what to serve for dessert, all you need to do is a bowl of vanilla ice cream and a, you know, a chunk of peach preserve on top of it, and maybe a cherry or something, and a swirl of cream, and you've got an amazing dessert happening. So, of course, strawberries, and in fact, this year what happened just before the mango season started, I discovered I had a whole box of mango pulp that I had frozen a year ago, um, at the end of last year's mango season, and I was like, I didn't want to throw it away because it was really quite a lot. So I just dunked it into the kadhai and I cooked it with some sugar, and I had some amazing mango jam. And so when the mango season started, Amit was getting fresh mango jam, and he was like, how did you manage this? I thought mangoes aren't really out as yet. And I was like, magic, kitchen magic. And so, and pickles, of course, is something that is so common around the whole world. I mean, of course, in Europe and stuff, their pickling is mostly in brine or vinegar. Our pickles are much more interesting. They have spices and they have oil and things like that. But if you've ever eaten a pickle called gobi shalgam da achar, which is very famous in Punjab and a lot of other parts of North India, it was basically a way of preserving the cauliflower and the carrot and the shalgam turnip, which is not available in summer. So you know, get sort of kilos of it and you chop it up and you pickle it, and it stays for a whole year. So for a year round, you have gobi shalgam achar, which is almost like a vegetable. So, you know, if you're feeling lazy to cook, you just boil a dal and make a couple of rotis, and you have gobi shalgam ka achar to eat with it. Any pickle for that matter, whether it's meat pickles or vegetarian pickles or sweet ones. And I remember my grandmother's pantry. In the old days, they used to build houses with pantries, and she used to have, it was always dark for some reason, and there used to be one small light, I think 40 watts or something, so that we kids couldn't see too much of the stuff. And there used to be these huge glass jars. We used to call them boyom in Bengali. You know, there'd be one with glucose biscuits, and we would only get 2 glucose biscuits a piece every day. And there would be muri, and there would be these pickles. In winter, she was always making kool, which is a kind of a plum, bed pickle, and she would be making tamarind pickle. In summer, she would make mango pickle. These are always the sweet sour pickles because she loved sweet sour. And we would sort of creep in there and, you know, take out some and go hide somewhere and eat it in the afternoon while everybody was sleeping. So, pickling is a great way of preserving produce that you may have bought excess of and you don't know what to do. You can make pickle with any vegetable. You can make pickle with bengan, brinjal, with jimikand, with tindli. Goans make an amazing pickle with tindli. And you know, it's all doable, and those pickles last forever. You don't really need preservatives. You can line them up in your fridge if you like, or you can just
Linus wants
keep.
to be called Linus.
Okay, hi Linus. You should be called Linus. So um, that's the thing about pickling and preserving. Now, when you're storing your butter and ghee and cheese, of course, keep it in a box or whatever, airtight again, because it gets fungus very fast. And with cheese, make sure when you're using it, don't use your bare hands, bare fingers. Use either, you know, wear kitchen gloves and then use the cheese, because the minute, especially in a country like India where it's the weather is not very happy all the time, and it can be hot and humid in a lot of places, it gets fungus very fast, and cheese spoils really, really fast, no matter, and you can't freeze it because then that spoils the texture of the cheese. So just make sure you don't touch the cheese with your bare hands.
You want to tell them that you
Which
can
is-
also freeze bread.
Yeah, I'm coming to that, Amit. So, which is also apparently the same thing with pumpkin. Like when I remember once when I was buying pumpkin from Vinay, my vegetable vendor, and he had this beautiful pumpkin lying, but I wanted to see what the reverse side looked like because I always cook my pumpkin with the skin. So I picked it up and I turned it around, and he was like, "Bhabhi, Bhabhi, please don't touch the pumpkin with your hands." So I said, "Why? What happened?" He said, "No, it'll go bad." So pumpkin also gets fungus very fast. So, in fact, my mother used to always store the pumpkin on the shelves, not in the vegetable tray, because it's always, it's not touching anything. It sort of sits there by itself, beautiful self, like that. And that's how she would store her pumpkin. Um, Give us this day our daily bread. You can freeze your bread. So if you have a favorite bread store which is like miles away, or you discover this lovely bakery and you want to buy bread, go ahead. You can buy like 4 or 5 loaves of it and different types of it, so that you save yourself a trip to and fro, because you can freeze that bread. And bread actually freezes very well. So and when you take it out to sort of eat, again, just put it straight into the toaster if you're toasting it. If you want to eat it soft and fresh the way it is, then you can just nuke it in the microwave for 30 seconds or so, and it's back to its uh, you know old self or new self, or whatever you want to call that. And that's how bread works. In fact, when I was baking bread, I would find that it's easier for me to make 3, 4 loaves at a time, and then slice them up and freeze them, so Amit could sort of help himself to a couple of toasts whenever he wanted, and it wasn't crowding up my refrigerator with unnecessary space. COVID actually taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to make bread. It taught me how to recreate a lot of street food like golgappas and things like that. It taught me about, I actually created my own yogurt with, starting with red chilies in milk and things like that. But it also changed the way we shopped. So the initial days when there was this fear when the lockdown suddenly happened, and we were like, we don't know where we're going to get stuff from. Are we going to starve? So the building society sort of got together, and they found this one supplier who would give us various grains and
We've been talking,
things like
saying he
that.
also has childhood memories of raiding dark pantry.
So at Lane Talk, Anup, you can come to Bombay. I have very big drawers which can also be dark pantries for you to raid. Anyways, so in the early lockdown of the COVID times, Amit and I, of course, went overboard, and right from toilet rolls to everything, be like, our study room was turned into a go down of sorts, and we had various things, and I made sure that the detergents were far away from the grains and things like that, separated everything out. But after the lockdown fear sort of went away, of course, booze, there was no booze. And that's when we realized it's very important to store alcohol in your house if you're drinkers. Anyway, so, but it changed the way one shopped. Today, shopping is online. I do very little of it. It's mostly Amit. He sort of sits on the machine and goes tippy tappy, and he keeps shouting out to me, "Do you need this? And do you need that? And should we buy this? And should we buy that?"
Jayati is asking, is there any pro tip for storing namkeen, particularly over rainy seasons, such that they don't lose the crunch?
Uh,
Don't become soggy.
Yeah, the thing with namkeen is you need to sort of, put it in airtight boxes, of course. But I was reading somewhere that you can also freeze namkeen. I don't know, I'll have to check that out. But I was reading somewhere that you can freeze things like wafers and stuff, and then you sort of take it out and it's as good as it was. I've never tried it. We don't really store namkeen in the house because Amit overeats. So I wouldn't be able to tell you now, but I'll look into it and see I haven't been very successful with namkeens. Peanuts and stuff like that, any dry fruits I put in the freezer after a little while. Um, Except in winter, I leave them out because that's when you can eat dry fruits, just like that. But in the rest of the months, I keep them in the freezer because they're mostly used for cooking. So, to go back to the way cook, shopping for groceries changed, it all became all about Amazon and online, and it was a very individual kind of thing. And scrolling through those lists and comparing prices and comparing product, that was something Amit is very good at, so I don't even go there. I don't even try it out. But what does happen is that we manage to order a lot of things from right all across the country. For instance, there's this lady on Facebook, Yasmin Rahul Bakshi, and she put me in touch with this person with a grocery store in Amritsar who was willing to deliver to us. So the minute I got his number, Amit was promptly on the phone with him. It was like, I think, a half hour or 1 hour long conversation. And we ordered rajma, and we ordered kali dal, we ordered the meat masala and the chole masala. Next time I'm ordering his rajma masala as well. And of course, that verka ghee, that ghee is really to die for. And I got some of the khatta, the black aam papad, which you don't get over here. So we were ordering things from Amritsar. It's time to order again. Then we were getting our spices from Kerala, straight from Kerala. We were getting things from Bengal, like Govinda Bhog rice and various other dals, a variety of dals that you don't get here in Bombay. And of course, even something like red chilies. I was getting my red chilies from a place called Mednipur. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Amit to sort of create a list in the descriptions below as to some of these special places from which.
Ash is saying biscuits I store in freezer. It's crispy like new.
Yeah, biscuits, but biscuits hardly last in our country, in our house. So, but I've heard about namkeens being stored in freezers as well. So you could maybe take a small quantity and try it out and see whether it works or not. But of course, it'll have to be really airtight, even your freezer container. So online shopping is great fun because you can get whatever you want from whichever part of the country you want. We get our hing from Kanpur, and we get our sambar and rasam powders from Coimbatore, and we get chai masala from Jabalpur. So it's like quite crazy in our house. And
Jyoti says, thanks, khub bhalo laglo. Please make an episode on freezing fresh produce. Love the idea of mango pulp. Panda chef is well pampered.
Choiti, no, don't freeze your mango as pulp. Cut it into pieces and freeze it. Pulp it later when you're going to use it. So anyway, remember to keep an eye on the best by dates. That's very important. You don't want to eat things that have expired. Don't be miserly with special things that you've bought. This I'm telling you from experience because I always tend to, hide special masalas and special things away, and then before I know it, they've died and we haven't partaken of it. So it's like use it or lose it, like they say. Weevils and mites are a reality in our country, so putting in that bay leaf or making sure you're storing small containers. Make sure your jars are glass or see-through. Even if they're plastic, they need to be see-through, or if they're steel, they should have at least some part of it which is glass or whatever, so that you can see it there and then, and sort of it's accessible visually, because things have a very strange way of hiding in clear sight in cupboards and drawers and things like that. I mean, for instance, last week Amit was ordering something on Amazon, and I told him my coffee's finished, so could you please order some coffee? So he ordered the coffee, and when he went to put it in my pantry drawer, he saw 2 big bags of coffee there. He said, "Why did you want coffee? There's already coffee in the house." So things have a way of hiding. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. I'm sure they have a life of their own. Anyway, so I'm going to leave you now. And please do go to your pantry and check it out and get inspired
Don't
and
leave
feel
now.
happy. And I'm going to taste that new Snickers flavor that Amazon has just delivered. Have you guys tried all these new Snickers that are coming out? They're really crazy.
Almond and
Yeah, there's almond and there's raisin and there's all sorts of things. And
caramel also.
caramel also. And oh yeah, one thing I forgot to talk about, which is the new thing in town, which is all these delivery systems. So when we were in Bangalore 3-4 years ago, we discovered Dunzo, and then by the time we came to Bombay, Dunzo and We Fast, and then when we went to Dehradun, there was this delivery system there called Laya Ji. If you know Hindi, Laya Ji means I am bringing it. So the delivery systems are the new thing in town, and I guess life is changing. So happiness. Bye bye.
Bye bye bye. Say something else. Okay, please tell them anything. What about this new show that you're watching? What do you have to say about it? The Terminal List on Amazon.
I've slept through most of that new show that you are watching, so I don't have too much to say about it. But when I did wake up at one point to see a little bit, this guy was sort of gutting the villain or something of that sort. It was a horrendous sight, so I went promptly back to sleep again. What I am going to do is, why don't you guys also send in topics that you would like to hear about or that you would like to explore with us? Like Choiti said, she wants to know about freezing vegetables. Freezing vegetables, I don't know if we can do it as a live show because I would love to demo it. So we'll probably do that as a pre-recorded kind of show.
She wants an episode on it.
Yeah.
Also
But
about freezing meats.
oh yeah, I forgot. If you're non-vegetarian and you're freezing your meats and fish, I always buy my meat and fish in bulk. Not in bulk like that, but I do my meat fish shopping maybe once in 2 weeks or something of that sort. So like when I buy chicken, I cut it. I prefer cutting it myself, and I portion it out depending, what one wants to cook with it, just like I do with vegetables. And fish also sort of portion it out, 4 pieces per packet or 6 pieces per packet kind of a thing. And meat as well. For instance, we just got a delivery of meats today, so those have all gone into various little packets that will get taken out. So you're not defrosting the whole thing and then taking out what you want to eat. You're just defrosting. And when you freeze it, make sure that you wrap it tightly in a plastic bag or whatever plastic covering that you're using, and then freeze it so that there's no frost happening. That frost sort of kills the texture of the meat. And the other thing is that my mother taught me, which is never wash your fish. Don't wash the blood off your non-vegetarian produce, because that blood sort of keeps everything, fresh and alive somehow when you defrost it again and cook it. So in fact, fish like Hilsa, for instance, she wouldn't even let me wash it while cooking. So when she would go to buy Hilsa, I don't know how many Bengalis are there right now watching, but Hilsa is, I'm salivating right now, the thought of it. Hilsa is this very bony fish that you get in Bengal, Poddar Nodi and West Bangladesh and stuff like that.
What is the other name of Hilsa?
Hilsa is Hilsa. There's no other name for Hilsa. Hilsa is very special. So you always tell the fishmonger that, please wash the fish and then cut it, because after that you're not going to wash it. If you wash it after that, then all the flavors go away. The oil, it's a very oily fish. The oil sort of gets washed off. In fact, when you're even frying Hilsa, my mother showed me, she would take like two pieces of the fish and she would start frying it in a very little quantity of oil. And by the time those 2 pieces got fried, there would be more oil in that pan than there was initially. So Hilsa, you don't wash your produce and then freeze it.
She had Hilsa Ilish March today.
Oh, you lucky girl, Choiti.
Ilish March is the new name.
Ilish March is Bengali. Hilsa is the English name. We are very English.
Did you tell them about storing like Italian herbs and olive oil?
Yeah, we talked about herbs and olive oil. And dhania, if you're, buying like my dhania patti and my pudina and green chilies always take the butt off the stalk at the end, take that off and store it in a plastic box or any kind of a jar or whatever. It stays for years. At least it stays for 2 weeks. And even your fresh coriander and fresh mint, if you sort of cut off the roots and don't wash it, just sort of shake off the mud that might be there on it, and then store it in a large container. You can line it with a little bit of kitchen towel or a tissue paper or something to absorb whatever moisture there might happen in the once it's in the fridge. And again, it will stay for a week fresh as a daisy, both pudina as well as dhania. So that's with storing the Indian herbs. Anything else? Any other questions?
Deep Sea Linus says Amit overeats.
Amit overeat. Amit doesn't overeat really.
Who
Amit
just falls into his mouth.
Amit doesn't exercise. If all you girls can please get him to exercise, then maybe he'll start losing weight.
And Ash is saying Hilsa is Hilsa.
Hilsa is Hilsa, yes.
She
There's-
says she had Hilsa and Ilish March. It's called Ilish March.
Yeah. So what Ilish did you have, Jyoti? Was it shorshe bata? Was it tel jhol?
Katrina wants to know which recipe.
She can hear me, no?
Yeah, she can. I'm just
Yeah.
typing it out in case she missed it.
Okay.
Tele jhol and
Tel
bhaja
jhol.
both.
Oh wow. Okay. Amit loves Ilish Mach Bhaja. In fact, you should actually, I should shoot a video. I should do an episode of Amit eating Ilish Mach because I taught him how to, pick up the bones, and he does a great job of it. And even when I do bhaja with the head, you crisp fry the head. Oh, he loves that. And
Kela, I know how to eat fish better than a lot of Bengali men also.
yeah, Amit knows how to eat fish better than a lot of Bengali men also.
That's a sponsored message.
He's paying for these messages, by the way. Okay, 40 rupees per message. And oh, by the way, there's this new thing that started. I don't know if you guys have noticed it. You can actually buy a sticker or buy a like or something like that. Quite fascinating. I saw it for the first time, I think yesterday or day before, whatever. Anyway, so Amit even eats luri churi, the fish oil, the hilsa oil. You cook that with brinjal and potatoes and onions and lots of green chilies, and oh my god, it is
I like
totally
hilsa
to die
oil
for.
with rice and green chili.
Yeah, he likes hilsa oil. Amit likes hilsa oil with rice and green chilies. Okay, now we're talking utter rubbish, so we should, I think,
Say thank you everyone. For
say thank you to everybody for joining, and see you again next week. And meanwhile, if you have anything that you especially would like to explore, like I said, do send in your suggestions.
Right comments below the
And you can, write in the comments below. And
the live chat goes away, so please post
yeah.
your comment about this podcast.
okay,
below the
and
video.
the live chat goes away, I'm told, so you can post your comments below the video as well, so that it's there forever. And I'm
share your feedback.
coming up with something very emotional and heart-rending in the next live podcast. So see you then, and do watch our
Tell Anoop
episodes.
to say hi to kittens.
And meow to Anoop, that's for your kittens from Amit. Bye.